The ranger said you come for the views. You stay because you don't want to admit how small you are in the dark. A tent zipper that slides by itself, a headlamp beam swallowed by trees, a voice across the valley that knows your name though you never told it. Tonight the trails are open, but something else is too. Breathe quietly. Step lightly. Welcome to Mr. BlackWhisper. I started the mist trail before dawn because I wanted the falls to myself. The sound was a living thing in the dark, a dull roar that crowded out thoughts. Granite sweated with cold, and the steps held a sheen like wet bone. I watched my breath leave my body and break apart in the beam of my headlamp, and I felt good, small in a safe way, like a coin at the bottom of a deep fountain. About half a mile past the railings, the official trail thinned. The park map made it look like a clean line, but maps don't record decisions, only outcomes. The switchback cut left. On the ground, someone had built a small stack of stones where the path bent. 3 flat rocks the size of hands, a 4th laid crosswise on top. It was comforting, like a stranger saying, "Keep going." I kept going. The dark had weight to it. The forest pressed close. I told myself it was only the hour and the elevation, but my steps drifted slower, my light more careful. The rock stacks multiplied, another at ankle height, then another, to confirm what I already knew. This was the right way. The spray drifted and froze in my hair. A whispering sound, not water, ticked through the chaparral. I told myself it was wind in the manzanita. The switchbacks should have widened near the junction with the overlook trail. Instead, the track funneled into brush. The cairns, those polite little stacks, continued on through scrub that scratched my legs. I corrected, angling back toward what I thought was the main trail. The headlamp caught fresh boot prints in damp dust. Not mine. Someone had come up recently while the rocks were still radiating last afternoon's heat. I matched my feet to the prints and felt steadier. I realized the sound I'd mistaken for wind was a whistle. A tongue-thin human whistle. You don't hear that in wilderness before sunrise without feeling something slide behind your ribs. I turned my light off. The roar of the falls rushed into the absence left by the beam. The whistle failed once as if someone's mouth had gone dry, then resumed. I told myself it was another hiker signaling a partner. I told myself that because the alternative was that it was for me. I kept moving, trying to find where the trail bit properly into the slope again. The footprints led to a low slab of granite and vanished. When I swept my lamp left, it found a new cairn, 5 stones now, and the top one a half moon. My legs felt hollow. I checked the map with shaking hands and realized the contour lines were wrong in my head. In the dark, up and down are opinions. The next cairn rested on something soft. I moved the light closer. It was a damp bandana folded into the stones. No color to it in the headlamp, only the suggestion it had been red once. My skin pebbled. Another whistle came, lower now. It wasn't a tune. It was a shape being made with breath. 3 notes, space, 2 notes. A pattern, a path you follow, because that's what you do when someone helps. I said out loud that I was turning back. It didn't matter that no one could hear over the falls. I needed to make the choice sound real. I pivoted, marking the cairns with the edge of my light. That's when I saw the prints again, not the ones I'd been following. Mine. My tread pattern, 1 star scuffed off on the left heel, walked cleanly into the brush and kept going. There's a particular quality to panic outside, an animal thinness to it. It makes you large and stupid. The headlamp makes a tunnel you can drown in. I swallowed and picked my way toward the sound of water. I knew there were railings at the main steps, and metal is a straight truth in wilderness. The whistle came again, closer now to my right, where the slope fell hard. I didn't look. I kept my light on the ground and my hand on the stone when I could. A smell like wet coins rose up. Spray flecked my face. The roar grew heavier, and then, suddenly, a sliver of silver rail appeared, slick and shining like a spine. I put my gloves on the rail and rested my forehead there. The whistle stopped. When I looked back, the forest was one seam of black. My lamp found the last cairn I'd passed, perched on a crack in the granite like a hand about to knock. The top stone had been turned. The half-moon faced a different direction now, toward me. By the time the sun had softened the edges of the trees, a ranger had joined me at the rail. He was polite and steady, and he listened. He told me cairns are a problem. They pull people into mistakes. He said to knock them down next time and trust the official markers. Then he told me something I didn't ask for. Sometimes after a search ends and the dust settles in the switchbacks, you can see a neat little procession of stones leading away from the blazed trail, too neat for weather, too thoughtful for chance. He said it's the living who build cairns most of the time. He said that twice. Then he asked me to show him where I'd seen the bandana. I led him to the place and felt my stomach go tight when I realized I couldn't tie. The brush was brush and the slabs were slabs, and everything looked like everything. He put a hand on the rail again, patient. At the trailhead, there was a sheet tacked under plastic by the map. A photo of a woman in a blue jacket, smiling with all the teeth of someone who hadn't yet understood how big a forest can be. A note that she'd been missing since late last fall. A detail about a bandana, if you have any information. I signed the log with a hard, embarrassing hand. When I lifted the pen, I noticed a smudge on my glove. It wasn't blood. It was the finest dust, ground granite with a hint of pink, as if someone had handled the stones until they colored. That night in the campsite, I faced the zipper toward the river and listened. The sound covered me like a blanket. Every once in a while, a bird would startle and go quiet again. Somewhere far off, a single note tried to become three, failed, and stopped. I laid my hand on the tent floor and felt the cold come up through it like a secret. I sleep indoors now. I leave the rocks where I find them. And when I need a direction, I keep my headlamp off for a while and listen for all the things that aren't T asking me to follow. The last thing I heard that morning between the roar and the wind was a breath shaping a path I would not take. I took the night audit shift at the park lodge because I thought winter in the mountains meant nothing would happen. The snow quieted everything. Tires hummed on the highway miles away like a remembered conversation, and the pines bent just enough to creak when the wind was tired. The lobby had a long stone fireplace, always cold. I liked to run a hand over it and imagine the heat that used to live there when the lodge was full of people and noise. At 2 a.m. the world falls out of itself. The cameras cycle. The compressor in the kitchen stutters and recovers. People in rooms stop turning over. That's when the river noise sneaks inside and learns how to echo, and your brain starts treating shadows like facts. That's when the back service door becomes important. There were 6 cameras: lobby, desk, corridor, loading bay, staff hallway, back door. The back door showed a view of darkness and a cut of snow with a halo from a dying bulb. It was the kind of picture that makes your eyes create movement just to stay entertained. I let it cycle past without thinking until the third flick, and then I sat up, because there were footprints where there hadn't been footprints 10 minutes ago. Not a path. A standing set of prints pointed straight at the door. The first camera pass showed only snow. The second showed 2 prints. The third showed the same 2 prints, but softened, as if they'd been there a while. I went to the window and put my forehead to the glass. The lot was a flat sheet of white. No car lights, no plows, no storm, just that light wind that keeps secrets from moving. If someone had walked up from the highway, they'd have left a line behind them. If they'd come from the loading bay, the other camera would have seen it. I told myself the camera angle was playing tricks. When I checked again, the prints were closer to the threshold by half a foot. I did the things you do to calm down. I made the lobby coffee. I counted the cash drawer twice. I printed the occupancy list and traced the empty rooms with a pencil, even though the cluster was in front of me on the screen. Then I did what the handbook told me to do. I buzzed the chef's quarters on the in-house phone. No answer. The maintenance cabin lines were dead for the season. The ranger station was 20 minutes by snowcat and politely closed by midnight. The back door cam blinked to black and lived again. The prints were now right up against the metal. A smear dotted the rubber sweep at the bottom, like someone had rested their weight there and slid. The motion sensor for the door beeped at the desk. Not the unlock beep, the proximity beep. Someone was on the other side. I stared at the lock indicator.
It glowed the steady red of a closed, obedient door. I walked to the hallway and stopped, because the sound of cold lives in the seams of buildings, and I could hear it now, breathing through whatever weather stripping the door had left. I decided then that nothing was happening and everything was a camera artifact. I decided this hard enough to move my legs down the corridor. The floor made a polite night shift thud under my shoes.
At the end of the hall, the back door waited like any other piece of hardware you can fix or ignore. When I got close, the sensor chirped again. The white noise of winter rose in the stairwell. I put my hand on the push bar and felt a steady vibration through it. Not knocking, not rattling. More like someone leaning their forehead against the metal on the other side and breathing with concentration. I went back to the desk. I told myself to call the non-emergency number. I told myself a ranger could lose 2 hours of sleep to tell me snow moves. I lifted the phone and set it down again because the camera flickered, and the prints weren't prints anymore. They were just the dark wetness of boot leaves when snow melts. No shape, no tread, just damp, as if the person had been standing there long enough to warm the threshold into a suggestion. The power sagged then, the way it does at altitude. The lobby lights thinned, gathered, and held. The cameras blinked out and back. When the back door came up again, the frame was empty. Clean snow. The rubber sweep had no smear. The wetness on the floor inside the door, I hadn't noticed before there was any, was gone. I looked down at the polished concrete at my feet. A small crescent of water glowed in the desk light. A print, but not a complete one. The kind you make when you step in from snow, pause to decide where to go, and then choose the hall with the rooms. I checked the occupancy list again, tracing the empty rooms hard enough to tear the paper. 212, 214, 216 were shut for the season. 218 too. I lifted my head and listened. The quiet pressed back. The river practiced being the highway. The fireplace stone gave off a dead cold that felt older than the building. I took the master key and walked the corridor. The smell was familiar. Detergent, wool, the faint sweetness of heated dust from the baseboards. As I passed 212, I knew what I would do if I heard a TV or a cough or the slow rhythm of someone sleeping where they shouldn't be. But there was nothing. The doors were square in their frames, the thresholds clean. In the staff hallway mirror, I saw myself, colorless under the fluorescent hush. My hair had melted into points on my collar. A dot of wet hung from my jaw, then let go and fell. I remembered the crescent of water by the desk and put my hand to my face like a child. When I returned to the lobby, the back door camera froze on a new still image. It was the hallway, not the exterior. A hinge view. The door opened a fraction, a triangle of pure night beyond. In the edge of the frame, I recognized my own sleeve. I scrolled back through the night's recordings, and there it was, clean as a signed confession. A minute of me walking to the door, a still of my hand on the push bar, a wedge of black like a mouth opening. Then nothing. Then me coming back, a damp crescent blooming at my feet. When morning came, the day manager listened and did the face people do when their belief in a person is trying to outrun their belief in an instruction manual. He walked to the back door with me. He showed me the chain set from the inside, where only someone standing on this side could place it. He pointed out the clean threshold, neat as a reset. He asked if I'd had a drink, and then he apologized for asking. I worked one more night because that's how rent works. The camera cycled, and I did not look at the back door. The compressor took its stutter and survived. The wind put its mouth to the pine seam and said nothing. I tell myself now that footprints are only evidence of weight, not intention. I tell myself the lock worked, the chain held, the rooms stayed empty. But every winter I wake at 2 with a wall against my forehead and the taste of iron in my mouth. And I understand that some doors open quietly, not to let something in, but to let something long inside out for a walk. The last time I drove past the lodge, the snow was clean as a page. I didn't stop. I watched the roofline reduce in the mirror and kept my hands at 10 and 2, as if they could bar a door no camera would ever catch. I am the one who opened it. The first time the radio answered a call I didn't make, the mountain was so still it made my teeth ache. Lightning had come and gone in bright, dry lashes all afternoon, and the valley waited like an animal that hadn't decided whether to run. I was on the third night of a 7-day hitch at the lookout. The room was glass and old wood, a plank bed, a table, a map with burn scars written in pencil. There's a flavor to solitude at elevation, tin and cedar, and a touch of tired pride, like a canteen that's done its time. Dusk went black in one long blink. The beam of the Osborne firefinder was a weak coin in the middle of the room. I liked to stand with my hands on its rim and pretend the crosshairs meant control. The radio hissed occasionally, as if some far-off thunder had found a wire to curl into. It was a companion with bad timing. I was making a note. Dry lightning, no starts visible, wind out of the east, when the radio crackled with a voice too clean for skip or static. Base, this is Lookout 2. Smoke column at 1:18:23, 90 degrees off my ridge, half a mile. Single tree, torching. Requesting confirmation. There is no Lookout 2 on my forest anymore. There was, once. The tower on Bird's Spine burned in the 70s, a slash of lightning and a bad climb out. The photos in the station archive showed it as a black cut on the ridge, like a fence post gnawed down by time. I took my thumb off the transmit key and put it back again, because that's what training does to your body. Lookout. 1 to base, I said. Negative on column at my position. Copy repeater traffic, unknown origin. Base came alive with a tired man's voice and the kind of calm that's built like a dam. Copy, 1. Recommend check your line of sight and confirm tower status. He was telling me to walk the catwalk and make sure I was alone. The wind pushed against the glass with a blind hand. The forest below rustled as if something large had sighed. I took the flashlight and made the perimeter, boots crisp on wood that had known 100 winters. The mountain gave back only crickets and the far, rote complaint of a truck on the highway. The radio spit and cleared its throat. Lookout 2 again. Column increasing. It's in the snag field below my west face. I'm watching embers spot uphill. Requesting engine. Voice steady. No panic. The report you dream of giving because someone will hear it, and then the right people will come. I set the flashlight down and put both hands flat on the map. I found my tower. I found the old one, its X still faint under layers of pencil. I laid a ruler across the coordinates the voice had given. The line passed straight through my tower. I did not transmit. I tuned the squelch and listened to hiss that had never sounded more like breathing. The old logbook lived under the bed. A thin ledger feel, pages made rough by hands that had turned them under thunderstorms and bluebird days. I found the year the tower burned. The entry was short. Lightning 1703. Lookout evacuated. Structure lost. A pencil thumbprint smeared after the words, as if someone had hesitated with heat at their back. Outside, a pinhead of orange winked in the dark at my 10 o'clock. Then 2. I pulled the finder around and put the crosshairs on them. They sat too low for fire. They were eyes, and the pair went out together, as whatever wore them turned its head. The radio. Wind shift. It's coming up my ladder. Voice close, as if spoken in the room and picked up by the mic by habit. Then a sound I didn't want to name. Old wood exhaling in heat. I keyed. Lookout 1 to base. I have unverified traffic. Request status on Bird's Spine Historical Tower, just to say it out loud. Base came back slow. Negative on any staffed sites within your repeater range except you. Recommend you power down and stand by. Standby means be useful by doing nothing. I turned off the overhead bulb and let the cabin go honest dark. The glass reflected faint starlight, tiny and sharp. If a fire had started below, the smell would come first, pitch and hot dust, and the kind of sweetness you only recognize once. I opened the north window and let the mountain put its mouth to the room. Nothing but the thin metallic breath of cooling rock. I put my ear against the radio speaker. Beneath the static was the rhythm you get when someone is speaking low and close. It's not the words you hear first, it's the intention. The cadence leaned forward. The logbook on the table fluttered once as a draft found it. Then the voice, right next to my left ear, the way sleep talkers share news in a stranger's bed. 1. Do you have me? I turned. The room contained only the shapes I had brought up. Stove, bed, chair, my boots by the ladder hatch like a pair of decisions. I picked up the pencil without meaning to and found that my hand had started to write. It moved with the careful respect of a student copying down a hard truth. When I looked, the line I'd drawn wasn't text. It was a coordinate string. It matched the ridge below the tower, not the old site. Thunder rolled without lightning, a low, belly-hollow sound that could have been a truck, except it was beneath me, in the bones of the mountain. My teeth buzzed. The radio went flat and then returned with a single word. Jump. The cabin took a white breath. The strike hit a snag below the tower, spitting light like a cut cable. The hair on my arms rose. I moved without choosing, crouching in the doorway as the world took its flash photo of itself. When it was done, a point of red glowed where the snag had been. A one-tree fire, torching, just like Lookout 2 had said. The wind out of the east put its hand on it kindly, and it died back to ember. I called it in with the calm the voice had taught me. Single tree, no spread, monitoring. Base said copy in the tone you use when both people know something unexplainable just saved work. I stayed awake until morning, watching the ridge for a breath that didn't belong to wind. When the first light turned the glass into a room again, I opened the logbook and found a new smudge below the 70-something entry. Charcoal, not pencil. A fingertip had rested there and then been lifted away. At the end of my hitch, I drove past the turnout below Bird's spine. The old tower site was a shoulder of blackened posts, graying into the slope like bones learning to be stones. Someone had propped a board against one of them. Weathered letters burned into it. We saw it first. The rest eroded. On quiet nights now, when weather leans on the cabin and the radio pretends to be an animal at the door, I keep a second chair by the finder. Not for company, but to acknowledge the shape of someone who did the job before me and never got to do it again. I don't answer when the voice asks if I have it. I just put my hand flat on the map, over the coordinates I didn't mean to write, and breathe like wood that has learned how not to catch. I leave the pencil on the open log, point toward the door, the way you leave a light on for someone who knows the way home better than you do. I drove Skyline after midnight because I'd told myself I needed to think, and there is no better place to hear your thoughts than a road that hangs between valleys. The park at night is a museum of silhouettes. Deer are statues until they aren't. The guardrails look like the quiet spines of long animals sleeping. The plan was simple. South to north. Pull off once to breathe. Back by 2. The dash clock was a small red decision. The radio picked up a station out of a town I didn't know, and then let it go. A song about leaving kept finding me anyway, in fragments. Milepost 53 slid past. Then 54. Then fog rose like steam from a wound in the world, and the numbers dissolved into it. The road ran clean, centerline bright as a promise. My headlights pulled the night toward me and sent it away again in a steady, calm rhythm. That rhythm is how you believe you're moving through something instead of something moving through you. I noticed the first wrong thing because I said it out loud. That milepost again. 53. It wasn't a big notice, more like a tap on the shoulder. Maybe I'd missed one in the fog. Maybe they were staggered. The next said 54, and I let myself smile at being dramatic. The radio found the song again at the same line it had left me. I sang under my breath to prove I knew where I was. A pair of eyes low to the ground shimmered at the shoulder and then slid into the trees. The fog had thinned to strands. The overlook I meant to use appeared and passed because I'd been inside my head. I told myself I could turn at the next one. The road is generous that way, offering chances every mile to admit you've missed what you wanted and try again. Milepost 53. I didn't say it this time. The song restarted. You can talk yourself into or out of anything alone in a car at night. I waited for 55 because that felt like the kind of number that couldn't be mistaken. The road curved right around a rise with a stand of pines that held their breath as I went by. When the number came, it was 54. I pulled off at the next overlook without deciding, not because I was afraid, but because my hands wanted not to be holding the wheel. The lot was a dark plate. The stone wall at its edge had the faint sugar of frost on it. The valley below was a shape made of cool breath. I turned off the engine to hear the world. It told me nothing helpful, only a ticking from the hood as the heat stepped down and the long, soft swallow of night. That's when I saw another car at the far end of the lot, a darker dark in the corner, where the light didn't touch. The driver's door stood open just enough to be an invitation or a note. I did the impolite thing and shined my phone light at it from across the way. The interior was empty. The dome light was off. An old air freshener hung from the mirror, stationary as a pendulum that refuses to swing. I walked closer and then stopped because the song came back, not from the radio tower, but from the other car, a chorus caught in a loop so soft it felt like a memory instead of sound. The open door breathed the same line, over and over, as if the station were stuck in the exact moment I kept re-finding on the road. I called out hello, in a voice I hoped sounded helpful. My words went up and thinned. No answer. On the seat lay a park map creased into obedience. It showed the drive like a spine, the overlooks like ribs. A pen had circled an exit. The exit lay south of where I stood. The pen had bled a little in one place, a dot beside milepost 53. I backed away, because backing away is sometimes how you show respect. When I rejoined the road, I felt how my tires found the same groove they'd already made. The fog reassembled. The pines held their breath at the same curve. The station glitched graciously, giving me the chorus as if I deserved it. 53, 54. The car clock tried to move but kept landing on the same minute, as if the gear behind the numbers had lost one tooth and could not bite. There are maintenance roads that cut beneath skyline, unmarked to tourists, used by people who know where the park keeps its arteries. There are gates with locks, and an etiquette to them. I thought about those roads because I needed a real explanation that could sit in my lap and not struggle. The next overlook had a sign for a trail that drops fast into a hollow where creeks go to think. I pulled in and set the brake, and told myself out loud that I would not get out this time. I would sit until the dash ticked to the next minute, and then go back the other direction because pride is a poor navigator. I stared at the clock as if it was a person who owed me money. The song ended. The silence after was obscene. The minute ticked forward. The relief that came was so bright I laughed alone in the car and felt foolish. I eased into reverse, alive to the idea that I had broken a small curse I'd put on myself. As I cut the wheel, my headlights caught the ground in front of the stone wall, a line in the dust where two cars' noses had kissed the curb before me. The same pattern, the same angle, the same ghost of rubber, as if all of us had parked in the same gentle mistake. In that thin dust were footprints on the passenger side, angling away toward the trailhead. A neat procession that stopped at the wooden sign and then turned around. The return prints were deeper, as if made by someone who had learned something and come back heavier with it. I followed them with my eyes, not my feet. They ended at a mark in the gravel that my brain refused to name at first. The shape of knees when someone goes down and stays there. The spot beside it where a hand had pressed once. I drove back south without waiting for the fresh, patient mileposts to explain themselves. At 54, I told myself I hadn't seen what I'd seen. At 53, I told myself I'd report the abandoned car when I got a signal. The song found me twice more, and both times I turned it off with a careful, respectful touch, as if it were asleep. At home, the gravel where I park held 2 crescents of wet, identical. My boots drew their own map between them, heel toe, heel toe. I stood there longer than I needed to, a man in his own driveway, and listened to a road that was 2 hours away and not done with me. A ranger called the next day. They'd found the car, ticketed and towed. The lots were clean. The mileposts were correct. He said it like a kindness. I thanked him and said what people say at the end of interactions where strangers have helped you be normal. When I drive that way now, I exit before the ridge learns my name. I tell myself the park repeats what we bring into it, not to trap us, but to hold up our loops and ask if we're ready to step out. Some nights I still hear the song in a kitchen that has never had a radio. Some mornings, there's dust on my floor in the shape of patient knees. I leave a window cracked and the clock unwound, and I do not count. The road counts enough for both of us. It was supposed to be a quick, respectful loop with my sister before the rain. A known trail, popular, broad enough in places for strollers and Sunday faces. The Smokies do a trick where they look soft until you walk inside them and realize how sharp they are. The trees had put their autumn faces on. The creek said the same thing over and over like a kind relative. We started late because family is a clock that runs on its own weather. At the junction where the bridge leans into the hill, a man stood beside a laminated sign that volunteers use to remind you about bears and trash. He wore a cap with the park's logo and a vest the color of leaves that want to be read but haven't decided yet. He had a clipboard. He smiled a practiced smile. He asked about our water. He pointed at the sky as if to warn it personally. He told us they'd had a washout further up, nothing serious, but to stick to the right after the second footlog while maintenance placed boards. He had a square of duct tape on his sleeve, the kind that covers a rip long enough to look like a choice. People in parks, like people in uniforms, they let you move without suspicion. We thanked him, and he nodded the way you nod when you have 20 more of these and the day is a little long. He touched the sign lightly. A habit. We walked on. The first wrong thing was a small stack of sticks at the base of a tree. It looked like a child had been making a fort for ants. The second wrong thing was a ribbon tied to a rhododendron branch, pale blue, a color between sky and hospital. The third wrong thing was realizing both wrong things were at the exact places where the trail offered you a choice. Keep to the broad path, or take a tempting shortcut that cut the switchback. We kept right. At the second footlog, boards had indeed been laid along the far bank, damp and honest. A boot print marked the middle of one, a tidy rectangle with a cross-hatched sole. The Capman's, maybe. My sister joked about loving a trail that tells you what to do. I laughed and watched our breath add to the gray. Half a mile later, the crowd thinned the way it always does when talk turns into quiet. The creek moved away from us, then returned, louder, as if deciding whether it liked us. The boards reappeared, another ribbon, another stick fort. The trail narrowed into something intimate and single file. Both of us stopped talking at the same moment without meaning to. There are silences that feel like a shared coat. There are silences that feel like a mouth closing around you. This was the second kind. We came to the washout. It wasn't much. The trail slab had slumped a foot, pocked and damp, a cut into clay that showed the park's red muscle. The boards lay there too, nested, ready to be placed. The ribbon fluttered from a limb like a vein flexing. That's when I noticed a small sign fixed to a stake at eye level. The sort of thing volunteers stick up to name a plant or warn about a bridge repair. It was hand-lettered, neat. It said, "Detour, arrow right." Someone had drawn a smiley face in the bottom corner, human and strange. We stood there, both of us teetering on a choice we didn't need to make. The main trail was passable. The detour looked plausible, a tight contour along the slope through mountain laurel that kept its own counsel. Behind us, footfalls joined the soft conversation of the creek. A group approaching. We stepped forward to be polite and let them pass. No group appeared. I told my sister we would stay on the main trail because I wanted to sound like a person who chooses the obvious. We moved slow across the slump. As we did, a stone slid under my foot and I grabbed a branch. My hand closed on duct tape. The branch had been wrapped for grip, a touch a trail crew makes. The tape was the same pale blue as the ribbon. Beyond the washout, the path took us through a stand of hemlock where light forgets how to be bright. In that dimness, the neat wrong things multiplied. More stick forts. Ribbons knotted low, at knee height, where you find them only if you're following, not looking. A pencil line of chalk on a rock, where someone's boot would land. My sister reached for my elbow in a movement that felt rehearsed. We stopped. The park's official blazes are paint, and they sit on living trees at a human eye level. What we saw then were not blazes. Someone had carved a little notch in the bark at the edge of the path, shallow, polite, a fingernail of raw wood. 10 paces later, another. I turned and looked back. And the notches disappeared at once as the angle changed, only visible if you were being led and not leading. That's when I saw the clipboard man again, up the trail, turned away, adjusting a board. The cap brim made a crescent. The vest read volunteer in a font that tried hard. He didn't look at us. He placed a board, stepped back, considered. Something in me refused his shape. The refusal was quiet and complete, like when your mouth knows a glass is chipped before you taste it. I took my sister's wrist the way I had when we were little and crossing streets. We turned around. I tried to make the turn casual. The woods knew we had changed our minds. They went very still, as if listening. We walked back, slower, eyes on the ground for the official paint I had ignored when the day was young and easy. We found one white slash on a beach and breathed in tandem. As we passed the washout again, the neat sign with the drawn smiley was gone. The stake held only a staple that winked wetly. Back at the junction with the bridge, the laminated bear sign had a new paper clipped over it. A missing persons notice, upload from a week ago. A woman in a rain jacket smiled next to a trailhead I recognized. Last seen near this loop. Underneath, smaller, a request. If you saw or spoke to a person acting as a trail guide or volunteer on the day of, please contact. I turned to find the man to tell him because that is what you do, and because I wanted the innocent end to this story. The park had printed a warning while I was hiking, and the volunteer had stepped away to help someone. The place where he'd stood was empty. The boards up trail remained stacked, unhung. A ranger came when I called. He had the calm and the caution of someone who has heard the same story told 2 ways. He asked for our route, our time, whether we'd accepted guidance. His eyes got tight at the duct-taped limb when I showed him. He asked about the ribbons without touching them. He did not look surprised. He told us then that the park had been having a problem, not monsters, not ghosts. A man who liked to place signs and trust, a person in love with the idea of showing people the secret way through the public place. It had been minor at first, shortcuts that cut, advice that put people at the wrong creek crossing. Then the missing notice. He said they were looking, quietly. He peeled the ribbon down with a gloved hand. He pocketed it like evidence and gave us each a bottle of water from his pack. He told us to report anything that looks official without being official. He said the forest amplifies our mistakes. He said it kindly, as if speaking to himself. We left the park by the main road with the other cars and their normal problems. In the rear view, the ridgeline folded its green into blue. The rain the volunteer had promised finally came, respectful and late. At home, I shook my jacket out, and a thin line of chalk lifted into the kitchen air and settled on the counter, a faint arrow that pointed in no direction I needed to go. I keep the cap I bought in the visitor center on a hook by the door, brim turned to the wall. When I hike now, I read the paint and ignore the kindness of strangers who are too kind. If a path wants me to choose it badly, it can wait its turn like anything else. When I dream of the trail, I hear a patient voice at my shoulder, explaining how to shave minutes off a daylight that belonged to me. I wake and drink water and listen to the old house learn how to be quiet again. The last line I do not speak in those dreams is the only one that matters. I did not follow.